Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ancient Warfare Answers. I'm by myself, so it's Murray's Ancient Warfare Answers today. And this is your 10-minute fix of ancient military history weekly. And, of course, you can back us as well. You can support us and ask us a question. You can go to the website www.patreon.com/ancient warfare podcast, and you can back us at one of three levels, a couple of which can give you a magazine, either in digital or in print. And of course, you can ask us a question. You can ask us a question however you like, in fact. So send us an email, contact us on Facebook, stalk us, do all that sort of thing. So today's question is from Micius Porcius from Patreon, and asks, during the imperial period, did consuls continue leading armies in war as they had in the republican period, or were legions only led by generals assigned by the emperor? And the answer is, generally speaking, you're needing to be in the emperor's favor to command a legion in the imperial period, even though there's still a cursus honorum for senators and for equestrians, and you have a series of political posts that you will need to go through in order to be given command of a legion. And then when you are given a military command, you are dealing with it under the auspices of the emperor. One of the three aspects of Augustus's setting up of imperial power, he has two attempts at doing that, and one of the final is the three aspects of it. One is the tribunician power, which all emperors talk about, their tribunicia potestas, the power of a tribune, which means they can veto things, and of course their body is also sacrosanct, so to lay hands on them is a crime. Secondly, they have Maius, which is Imperium Maius. So they command the army. The army is loyal to them. And so what that means, of course, is that all armies are the emperor's armies, and therefore the command of those in smaller sections is deferred by the emperor. So generally speaking, you are going to have some kind of imperial approval to be a military commander of some kind. Obviously, there are lots and lots of subsections of that, which are they on top of it? Probably. There's not that many, even though we like to sort of see all of them and work out what's going on. And obviously there are people who die in office and get replaced, and so there's certainly people waiting in the wings to take those places. There's also some aspects to it which seem to be following a very strict set of rules, and then every now and then those rules are thrown out the window. So it's hard to sort of say this is the rule. But what you have, of course, is in terms of the command of a legion, you have, or should I start the other way around? You can have the commander of a province, the governors of the provinces who command the armies in the province. Now, generally speaking, they are all proconsular, but they're not given a province simply because they are a consul or have been a consul. They would expect to, but they're not necessarily getting one. And of course, the other thing with the provinces is that they can be before a consulship as well. So often we find that the governors of provinces are called a legatus Augusti pro praetorii, so they are a propraetor. And interestingly, of course, one of the aspects of Roman Imperium, even though the emperor had Imperium Maius overriding command, and of course they're called imperator, which is where we get the word emperor from, which is about military command, imperator, imperium. But of course, the other thing about them is they defer it to sort of give a little subsection of imperium to their legates who operate on their behalf. So that's the first level. You've got legatus Augusti pro praetore, who are the governors of provinces. You've also got some provinces which are governed by praefectuses or prefects, and some even by procurators. Generally speaking, those commands would defer to a a legatus Augusti from somewhere. So, for instance, if you've got the Judea, who's commanded either by a procurator or a praefectus, they are subordinate to the local Syrian propraetor. So that's that. And that basically seems to be something that's given to you by the emperor's favor and can be taken away by the emperor's favor or not granted. So, of course, below that, you have the commanders of individual units, whether they be prefects or whether they be tribunes, or indeed whether they be other types of commander. And so that also has its sort of rules, but again, we find that those rules are thrown out of the mix. So in the cursus honorum of the Roman Empire, you've generally got, you're a military tribune at around the age of 20, you're a quaestor around the age of 25, and then perhaps you're an aedile, and then you're a praetor at around the age of 30. Those aren't fixed in stone, but tend to be a sort of a trend. Again, normally we find that it's after you've held a praetorship that you are given command of a legion. But we do find that there are people given commands of legions prior to that praetorship. So we find ex-quaestor commanders of legions, especially in years like 69 AD, where lots of legions are loyal/disloyal, and they have to replace their commanders, and they're given these commands. And of course, your consulship, generally speaking, people will talk about, the age of consulship is 42. Under the empire, it gets lower to about 32, but you find various different people bypassing the number of years you need to wait between holding one office and holding the next. So generally speaking, the emperor could ignore any rule and just make you a commander. But there are a cursus honorum of officers that you would need to follow. So what we find is that there are the military tribunes, and they are number of tribunes per legion, and then you go on to become a quaestor. You might become an ex-quaestor commander of a legion, and then you might go on to be a praetor, become commander of a legion again. And we do have several people who hold commands of legions for a number of years, much longer than you would expect in a normal career progression. And they, move around these legions. So it's not just one legion that they stay with. Often they command various different legions. In the wars of Marcus Aurelius, for instance, you find men who are the commander of 4 or 5 legions in succession. So very much gaining more experience and things like that. So you've got that. You've also, of course, got equestrians, so not senatorial order, and the equestrians who also have their own cursus honorum. And at some point, they generally get adlected to the Senate. So then they become senatorial. So for an equestrian, you've got another sort of 3 military posts, which is a praefectus cohortus, so the prefect of a cohort. Then you become a tribunus angusta clavius, which is a military tribune. And then you become a praefectus ally, which is a prefect of a cavalry wing. And often at some point, after your military tribuneship, you will be promoted to the Senate. There's 30 legions, there's 20 tribunes a year as they move along. So there's certainly a progression of commands that are generally, as long as you don't do anything wrong, you can keep on track. But we do know in several cases that there are individuals who upset an emperor, or an emperor who is sycophantic. Domitian comes in for a lot of abuse, for instance, Nero and all of these others. And so they ignore the system, or they get rid of good people and promote bad people, or they, quash the career progression and advancement of a good commander. So we have that. I mean, obviously the most famous of those is Agricola, when Tacitus writes his biography, his father-in-law. So he's telling us about how bad Domitian was and all the bad things Domitian did in that regard. So there's certainly this progression, but it is something that is very much within the power of the emperor to control who you went. The other thing, of course, which we haven't mentioned, is the the concilium, that the emperors start to build a group of advisors around them who generally are men of military experience who will generally act as a pro-praetor or a pro-consular commander, but they're there as the advisors of the emperor and given positions of command by the emperor based on that relationship. So we get that. And then, of course, in the later Roman Empire, that develops into magistracy, military, and all those sorts of things. So it's complex, but it does tend to defer to the authority of the emperor because he's the one who commands all the armies, theoretically. There you go. Hope that answered your question, Micius. Right. We'll see you next time.